3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
All right, welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about the history of hockey. So the origins of the game known as ice hockey descends from an earlier game, similar to it, called hurling, which came from Ireland and also was played in Scotland as well. But this game was brought to Canada by Irish and Scottish immigrants back in the 1800s, which really laid the groundwork for what would become ice hockey. And ice hockey would become its own sport in the late 1800s, and by 1875, the first official indoor ice hockey game would happen in Montreal, Canada. Now later, by 1917, you had the true professionalization of hockey with the development of the National Hockey League, which still exists today, also called the NHL, where you had various teams competing for what is called the Stanley Cup trophy that in fact predates the NHL itself and has been competed for since 1893 by different hockey teams. And out of all hockey teams currently in the NHL today, only 2 teams have existed since the beginning of the league in 1917. And these teams are the Toronto Maple Leafs, who at the time that the league was formed were called the Toronto Arenas, and the Montreal Canadiens, who still rep the same name as they did back in 1917 when the league was founded. Now, the modern version of the NHL features 32 teams today across the United States and Canada, with the Montreal Canadiens being the most successful team historically, having won 24 Stanley Cup championships. Yet, they haven't actually won the Stanley Cup since the 1990s. So it's been a few decades since the Montreal Canadiens were on top of the NHL. But historically, they are the best team in NHL history despite their lack of success in recent decades. However, when it comes to the greatest hockey player of all time, Wayne Gretzky, who is the all-time leader in goals, assists, and points. In fact, he has so many points that no one's ever going to come close to breaking his record in the near future. It's so ridiculous, in fact, that he has more assists in NHL history than any other player has in points. Wayne Gretzky had actually 2,857 points, and the second closest player was Jaromir Jagr, who had 1,921 points. Yet Gretzky, just if we're counting his assists alone, had 1,963 assists. So even with just assists alone, if we don't count any of Gretzky's goals he scored, you would have 42 more points than Jaromir Jagr in second, which just shows how ridiculously good Wayne Gretzky was as a player. And if you're not familiar with the National Hockey League, you get a point for a goal or an assist, which is why his records have lasted 25 years since he's retired and are ongoing, and is why Gretzky's called the greatest player of all time. However, with all records, they do come to an end eventually, usually, and Gretzky's record for most goals ever actually could be ended in the near future here by the Russian hockey player named Alexander Ovechkin, who is now less than 30 goals away from tying Gretzky's record and breaking it. Ovechkin, though, is playing a game against not only the record, but also against Father Time, though, since he is age 39 now. Now, when we think about international hockey, Canada leads the world in Olympic gold medals with 9. They've also won the most championships in other international competitions like the World Cup of Hockey or the Canada Cup before it. And some of the greatest hockey players of all time come from Canada, not just Wayne Gretzky, who is called the Great One, but also players like Gordie Howe, Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby, Bobby Orr, Mark Messier, and of course my favorite hockey player of all time, Paul Kariya, the original superstar for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, who are now just called the Anaheim Ducks. I remember as a kid watching the Anaheim Mighty Ducks play against the New Jersey Devils in the 2003 Stanley Cup Finals, and being horrified that especially a team called the Devils, which is so fitting of a name for them, would beat my Ducks in Game 7 of the championship and prevent my favorite player, Paul Kariya, from ever winning the Stanley Cup. But beyond Canada, other countries also are known for being pretty good in hockey, as well as having lots of pretty good players historically, like the United States or the Soviet Union when it still existed, and now really modern Russia, have also had a history of success in international competitions. The United States is most known for its miraculous Miracle on Ice gold medal, where the U.S. would win the 1980 gold medal in the Olympics, defeating the Soviet Union professional team made of professional players, while the United States was featuring just college players because players who played in the NHL were not allowed to perform in the Olympics in that year. And so the Soviets, which did not allow their players to play in the NHL, but did have professional players, were playing in the Olympics. And so you had this big mismatch between a bunch of college kids and Americans playing against the Soviet team of all-stars and upsetting them, and then going on to beat Finland in the gold medal game to win the gold medal. The United States, though, has also since then had lots of pretty amazing players like Brett Hall, Chris Chelios, and Mike Modano. And the Soviet Union, remembered famously for having players like Vladislav Tretiak. But once the Soviet Union dissolved and you have Russia instead, Russia was famous for players like Sergei Fedorov, Alexander Mogilny, Pavel Bure, and today Alexander Ovechkin, who certainly is the greatest Russian player of all time. So with that, in turn, hockey is one of the top sports in North America and in Europe, and continues to grow around the world. It's quite popular in Sweden and Finland as well, and Czech Republic. And really, from my perspective, is one of the most entertaining sports to watch and one of the most fun to play. Growing up, I played hockey, and just super exciting sport, just kind of interesting and dynamic. You're skating on ice, something very unique. It's a very unique sport to play because it's so different than the other sports, and definitely one that has just a pretty cool atmosphere about it, and a really cool feeling when you're skating on the ice, gliding, and you kind of feel the air rush on your face as you're gliding around the ice. And if you haven't played it before, or if you haven't really ice skated much before, I highly recommend you do. And especially once you learn how to skate, it's something that I think you'll really grow to like a lot as well. So with that, as always, remember, billions of years led to you, so make the most of it.